Recording. All right. So the outline, or I guess layout of tonight's panel, I will be starting with some questions, and then we'll also have time at the end for questions from the audience as well. Okay. All right. So first up, panelists, please tell me what comes to mind when you hear the words women's history.
I don't know why L. Donovan too was coming up in that one.
Well, I can.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Lauren.
I can jump in. I think, first of all, thank you so much, Dr. Hanley, for inviting all of us. I'm excited about this panel tonight. When I think about, women's history, I'm really thinking about how past events and experiences have really shaped and paved the way for women to be able to thrive and really break the glass ceilings. As I was thinking about this panel tonight, I was thinking about, the women's suffrage movement, right? And the Women's March in 1913 that really brought together women from unique backgrounds, identities, social organizations to really stand up for equity and equality. And because of those experiences and those, the brave women leaders that we had so long ago, right? We were able to see so many different moments happen in history where we had the Equal Pay Act, where we had the 19th Amendment, where women are now being able to vote. So for me, women's history is really this time, this intentional and purposeful time that we're setting aside to reflect on the past, right? Thinking about the rich legacy and the rich history that were behind us, but then really taking a moment to say, like, where are we headed, right? We appreciate the accomplishments, we appreciate the achievements, but we know as women, there's still a lot that needs to be done to advance the opportunities for us. Thinking about what other doors still need to be open that are currently closed. I know we have Kamala Harris, and she was, instrumental in terms of being the first woman of color to serve as vice president, but we still have not had a woman president, right? So what are those doors that are currently closed that need to be open? I think about who's missing from leadership tables, right, that have the power to radically change healthcare systems, because we know from maybe our own experiences and because of research that Black women aren't getting or being taken seriously when it comes to childbirth. We're having Black women dying during childbirth. There's so many different things I'm thinking about, but when we think about history, first is really understanding the past, where we've come, but where do we still need to head? What doors do we need to open? Who should be sitting at the tables, leadership tables? Who should be in our classroom teaching our students to advance DEI practices within education? All of those things is really going to help shape us and propel us towards a future that I believe is important as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. When all of that happens, that's really when we can see a world that all of our children and our children's children can be proud of.
I think Lauren summed it up, honestly. I was just going to say just the evolution. It makes me think about our evolution and past, present, and future, like where we've been, where we're going. I think it's a great time to be alive as a woman, as a Black woman. It is peculiar times that we live in, but just the impact that we're able to make because of the progression that has happened. But we still have a lot of work to do. And so to be on the front lines with women like you, feels amazing, and just makes me think about us stepping into our rightful place and power. It's always been there, but there's a spotlight on it now. So that's what I think when I think about women's history.
Yeah, I feel like you two summed it up perfectly as well. But for me, when I think about women's history, is also really being able to honor the women that came before me and like help me on the path that I am on today. So I come from a family of immigrants, and that's a very central part of my identity. And just knowing that my aunts and my mom didn't have as many opportunities, and they have had so much sacrifices to be able to get me to where I am today. And I also want to be able to, not necessarily, I don't believe in like being a sacrificial lamb for others, but being able to be there for other women, being able to uplift women as a way of creating and promoting history and honoring the history of where we have been and where we're continuing to go. And yes, we have broken the glass ceiling in some circumstances. And also when we look at statistics, I won't go into research things, but when we look at statistics of knowing that we, like specifically Black women, are still underpaid for so many other aspects of their life. When we think of Black women in academia, this isn't something that we see very frequently. Yes, we need representation, but also we need to feel like we have a place. We need to feel as though we belong. We need to feel some type of representation, even as like faculty and administrative members of institutional bodies. So whenever I think of women's history, I think of really honoring the women that have come before me and everyone who's paved this way, but also me being able to conceptualize and reflect, how can I be a stronger woman for other women down the line, like my nieces and all of the women who come after me. So what type of world am I creating so that it is better and that we don't have to keep having first? Like, I hate that we're still like 2024 and we are still having, this is the first Black woman who's done this, this is the first person of color who's done this. I think that's so ridiculous to see, and it's kind of disheartening, but I'm ready to get out of this place of being the first and just honoring women for all of the power that they have and things that they've done.
I think that's so good. I don't know if I have anything major to add to that. However, one thing that does come to mind is cost, right? And when I think about women's history, I think it's really, my natural response is always the major accomplishments, right? That we can kind of run down the list. And to your point, right? Like how we start talking about who was the first or the second, because that's still very like important. But I also think about a lot of those accomplishments and things that occurred that were like unwritten and or have not been named. And that to me is such a place for us to really think about the cost of the work that has been spearheaded by Black women. And particularly thinking about our positionality that has historically been political in nature, if you will. And so I think that there's just a lot that goes unsaid about what Black women bring to the table, what we've done for a long time, that whole like nothing new under the sun. I feel like a Black woman's already done it, honestly. So that's just something that just comes to mind.
Thank you all so much for sharing. So we touched on a lot. We touched about what we've done, where we'd like to go. We touched on what we see in our families, within our businesses, within, just how we navigate and move through the world. And you all touched on this a little bit. I just want to see if there's anything that you want to add. What are some other identities that are important to you that you feel comfortable sharing? So we've talked about womanhood. We've also talked about Blackness, being a parent. Are there other identities that come to mind for you when you think about women and women's history?
I think I can add a few things. I had the pleasure of doing some really beautiful research with senior executive C-suite level Black women who had experiences across multiple industries. And one of the things that was really important or essential to the framework that was developed was not just the racialized experience and the gendered experience, but also those cultural pieces. So I get really excited when I get to think about what my grandma contributed and my aunties, right? And like all these other women who had a lot to do with how I show up and what I do, and particularly thinking about how Black women's entire existence has been very much in service for as long as we've known them. And so I think that for me, being things like Southern is important to how I show up. And I think being Christian, and I grew up Southern Baptist, I don't know if that means anything to anyone, but that has a lot to do with my own like moral compass and spirituality that is very important to how I navigate institutions and organizations. I also get to tell people, right, that I'm like a sister and a cousin, and I am from rural Eastern North Carolina, which brings back a set of languages or colloquial pieces that I think are valuable to how I get to speak in places today, and privileged to have a language that is spoken amongst my family that the folks in my boardroom don't have to understand what I'm saying in order to like, for me to be good at what I'm doing, right? And so I think it's those types of things that I get to attach to my identity, and those things at the intersections, right? Because that's really what I'm getting at, that like whole personhood for Black women is actually completely complicated and nuanced. And it's a really beautiful place to be in.
I would like to add to that. So an identity that I have and would like to share is one of a healer. And I know that looks so many different ways for all of us and many different people, but typically women are the ones that are spearheading difficult conversations, but also adding a little honey, making it sound sweet, and making it tough when it needs to be. So I think my gift as a healer is just being able to have conversations openly. And I think we talked about in my bio earlier that the mental health space is one that I'm really interested in. I love talking about psychology and healing and mental health. I'm not uncomfortable with that. There's a podcast that I have where I've had people come on that have mental health disorders like schizophrenia. So putting faces to those disorders and those titles and names, but just humanizing them. And so when I look around, I know there are men healers, but women are typically at the forefront of that and doing that work. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful identity that I love to be able to share with other people. And so that's something that comes to my mind. And then as a mom, I do have a 5-year-old, and it's a beautiful thing. It's birthed new versions of me as a woman that I didn't even think existed. And so being able to birth life, in the midst of adversity, it wasn't a perfect situation, but here we are still doing the work, still having the tough conversations and healing conversations. And doing that naturally was something that I think had I not gone through that process, I don't know if I would feel the power inside of me that I do the way that I feel it. And so those are two identities that come to my mind when you ask that question.
I can jump in from Soleil, thinking about motherhood. I could talk all day about being a Black woman, but I don't think I talk about motherhood a lot. And so I guess I'll use this space today to talk about it, just kind of think about what Soleil said. I am a mother of soon to be 7-year-old twins, and it has been rewarding and challenging. But motherhood has been that thing that has allowed me to be able to instill in my children powerful life lessons that they'll be able to carry with them in the world. Think for my son is really kind of just teaching him how to be proud of the skin he is in as a little Black boy. And despite what the world may say about him or how they might treat him as he gets older, it's reminding him every day that he's brilliant, that he's powerful, that he's capable of accomplishing anything that he sets his mind to. And I think for my daughter, very similar things, just kind of teaching her how to be authentically her, how to go into any space, command the room, do not have your head held down, be the leader you were designed to be, and model the way. Be a role model, be empathetic, be caring and compassionate to others who may not look like you. Even if someone treats you wrong because of the color of your skin, don't you give them that same energy back. Be respectful to all people. Unfortunately, my mom is my greatest friend, right? But we did not have kind of sit down intentional conversations about how to navigate spaces when you're the only. She put me in spaces where I was the only, but we didn't have like, Mommy, I'm experiencing this. We didn't have those conversations until I got older. So had we had those conversations, I think I would have been able to better be prepared when I had encounters with counterparts undermining my work when they felt intimidated by me as a Black woman, or how to respond to a white supervisor that tells me because I'm in a leadership position now, and now I can somehow pave the way for Black women. Just the inappropriate things that were said to me when I was in the workspace. And oftentimes I felt like I was the token Black woman. So what I want to now do, and I wouldn't call it a generational curse, it's just something that I'm going to do differently in my parenting style, where now I'm very early on going to talk to my children about how, despite their intersecting identities, we are not defined by our stereotypes. We are not defined by the limitations that people put on us. There are going to be ups, there are going to be downs, but remember who you are and remember whose you are as well.
Wow, I really love that. Thank you for sharing that. And for me, it's a bit contrastly with the other two, but I really see my predominant identity right now as being an aunt. I love being an aunt. I am child free by choice, so I'm so thankful that my sisters want to have kids because I love kids, just don't want them permanently. But being an aunt has really helped me understanding just development and also seeing small parts of myself in like these little people in my life, and once again like wanting to create a better world and talking to them about all of these things. I have, hopefully it wasn't traumatic for them, but for me I was like, I need you to be this way. But I was talking to one of my nieces, she was maybe 8 at the time, and I was asking her all these different questions for a lifespan development class. And I asked her, what would you do if you saw a boy in a dress? Like, how would you respond? She was like, oh, maybe I would compliment him on his dress and maybe I would get to know him and we would play. And I was like, please don't ever change, like, stay like this forever. And being just there to promote equity for my nieces and nephews and being there to broaden their perspectives and broaden them to these new ideals that they may not always be exposed to is something that I find extremely meaningful. So definitely being an aunt provides so much meaning and just livelihood for me. I love being a counselor and everything else, but at the end of the day, what is most important to me is my family and my spirituality. And I group my friends, my loved ones into my family because those are my rock. And within my spirituality, it has really been coming to my own of what I believe in, a higher power, and being able to break free from like past religious trauma and just seeing the wholeness of humanity. I think of whenever I work with clients, one thing I say is that I'm not the expert in this room. I am another human that's embodying this space with you. So instead of it being this hierarchical or power dynamic, of it just being, I am a human like everybody else, and I'm here to connect with other humans and to bring as much peace and compassion and understanding as I can. So those are all really salient parts of my identity. Yes, I love my work and I love my job, and I don't believe that I'm here on earth to work and make money. I feel like I'm here on earth to connect with other humans and to just provide as much peace as I can in a very destructive and chaotic like landscape that we're currently living in.
Ooh, y'all dropped some gems. Thank y'all. Okay, so we talked about the intersections of Black womanhood, how that shows up in our personal and professional lives. I love the talk about healing and the different ways that that can happen, whether that is with clients or with children. We talked about imparting wisdom on children, whatever type of role you hold in that, whether that's motherhood or auntyhood. And then we also talked about embodying these spaces as we are also navigating them with all of our intersectionalities. So I do want to ask you all, what comes to mind when you hear the phrase safe space? What does that bring up or mean to you?
For me, I would say authenticity. I feel very comfortable around people that are simply being themselves, whatever that looks like. There are people who personally I'm like, she be doing too much, but she's being herself and I cannot be mad at her for that, right? So when people are authentic and who they are, just makes me feel like I can be that way. And I love bringing my confidence to whatever space I'm in because I think it gives permission to other people who may not feel the same way about themselves that I do, that they actually can. So that's what I do with the confidence coaching. It's like I'm not embodying anything different than what you're able to tap into. So I just help you remember that and figure out what it looks like for yourself. So when people are just being themselves, to me, that's a safe space. Kindness is really important. Being conscientious of how and emotionally intelligent too. So I think sometimes people, get this, it's all about me. I'm being confident. I don't care what anybody think. But that can kind of rub people the wrong way at times. And so just being aware of how you show up and how you're making people feel and what energy you're bringing to a space and how that's affecting other people and what may be bouncing off them back to you. And so just being mindful, being kind, diversity is really important. It makes me feel safe. There are some times where, diversity doesn't always mean safety, but when you're in the room with people that feel like you're people, so just those things come to my mind when I think about safe spaces.
I have to agree with Soleil. Hi, sweetie.
Hey.
And also Lauren, welcome to the fraternal twins. I'm a fraternal twin too, and I have fraternal twin brothers as well, and Soleil as well. So that's really neat. It's a lot of us. Well, I'm Dr. Latasha Donovan. I am a teacher for Richmond Public Schools, and I wanted to attend this meeting today. I saw it on LinkedIn, so shout out to LinkedIn for it. I was like, oh, sounds pretty cool to come to. And then I saw Soleil as one of my girls, so I was like, I got to come and see her as well. So, but safe spaces, I wish we could have more safe spaces in the education system. And I think, Amber, you touched a little on that as well. I think as an educator myself, is a lot of times in the beginning, as an educator, I've been an educator for 16 years now. So in the beginning, you find your ways to, you humble yourself at first and you try to navigate the educational system. And then you see where some people try to mistreat or try to talk down to you, and you're like, okay, let me try to keep it professional. And, I found over the years as a teacher that I had to learn how to use my voice. I come from a military background from my mom, and, she raises girls to be very independent and also strong. And when I started when I first started teaching at the age of 26, I ran into a situation where it was kind of racial. And I talked to my mom about it, and I was like, why is this, white principal, um, assistant principal, it seems like she's intimidated by me, but I'm a teacher. So how do I handle this? So I did go to my mom for that information. And it was kind of traumatizing because you don't expect that to happen to you. You don't expect racism in a way to happen to you, although we were raised to hear about it, and with our ancestors that came before us. But at the end of the day, you sometimes you don't think it's going to happen to you in certain spaces, and it did. And so I used that to propel, like I would never not use my voice. And I'm a writer, so I learned. My mother always taught me, if somebody ever disrespects you or you don't feel comfortable in a certain space, whether it's on your job or not, you have the power of the pen and you have the power of an email, which emails always hold up in court. So if there's legality that needs to come with it, you take, you do what you have to do. Um, so I learned how to use email for that particular situation, because that space was becoming uncomfortable for me with that person. It didn't come uncomfortable for me as a teacher with my students and colleagues that I got along with, but I had to learn how to use my voice against white women that were trying to somehow just thinking that their power was over my power. And I had to learn at a very early age that this is kind of like a dog eat world. And you have to learn how to use your voice. You have to learn how to stand up for yourself in certain spaces. And you have to kind of take no for an answer. Like, I'm not going to allow you to speak to me this way. And I think it's very crucial for Black women in general to learn how to use their voice, to learn how to rise in their power. Um, it doesn't matter always your titles that you may have and the hats that you may wear, but knowing that, if others know that you have those hats and disrespect your hat, basically, if I want to say it in that manner, still rise up in your power and learn how to use your voice in these particular spaces that you have to work in, or whether it's male dominated or woman dominant, you still have to learn how to rise up and use your power and your voice. So I think even after 16 years of teaching, I have used my voice many of times. And I just, I feel empowered when I use my voice. Like, I don't like to hold back anymore. If someone just comes at a different way, I still will use email if need be. But if I can use my voice to rectify a situation, I will. And I feel like that helps me to be more empowered, like, because so many times you don't want to use your voice because you don't want to take it to a different level. But sometimes it is necessary as a woman or a Black queen to use your voice in those spaces to let people know, like, I'm not going to tolerate this behavior from you, or and you just have to do that. I've had to do it a lot. I don't know why I have to always do that every year, but now I feel like I'm at a place in my life. I'm 43 years old, so I feel at a place in my life that I'm gonna use my voice no matter what. I'm never gonna, like, not be quiet. I'm not gonna be one of those silent women in history that just didn't use their voice. I'm a fair person, I'm a just person. I don't like when others are mistreated. If I see something going on, I do stand up for others. And over the years, I've found, like, other women coming to me like, "How do I do this?" or "How do I get out of this situation? What do you think I should do?" And I've been able to help different colleagues on different situations and different things that they've gone through to
Thank,
kinda just find their voice in their space,
thank
So,
you. Thank you so much for
thank
sharing.
you. You're welcome.
Anything else from the panel that y'all want to touch on?
I can jump in really quick, Erin. I think for me, when I think about a safe space, if you know anything about me, I love acronyms. So when I think about a space, it's a space where I can be real. And for me, real, and some of you all have already said it, but for me, real is Can I be resilient in this space? Can I be empowered in this space? Can I be authentic in this space? And does this space provide limitless opportunities? So if thinking about resilient, is this space going to be, and space can be a physical building, so like a job, a church, or it can be your friend group, it can be a social community group, it can be an event gathering. So I'm thinking about all of those when I think about safe spaces. But resilient, does it allow me, if I fall, if I make a mistake, if I'm going through challenges, does it provide for me the tools and resources that I need to bounce back, right? And to accomplish everything that I set out to accomplish? Does it make me feel empowered? Do I feel that this space provides me with a sense of agency, right? And the confidence within this space to kind of maneuver through it? Does it allow me to leave the space better than when I came in? Because we go through different challenges in the workplace. But if I go into the workplace, does my supervisor or does this space or this community of people allow me to feel better once I leave the space and go back home, right? Or does this space make me feel like if I made a mistake, it'll be held over my head? Right? Do I feel like when I leave this space, I'm going to be uplifted and valued and validated and encouraged to pursue my goals and aspirations? Then when I think about the A and authentic, regardless of my background, where I've come from, I'm also from a little girl from North Carolina as well. Regardless of who I am, regardless of how I speak, regardless of my skin color, despite my socioeconomic status, despite whether I show up in the workplace with my relaxed hair, my natural hair, or my hair in braids, does this space really allow me to bring my whole self, right? Does this space allow me to show up who I am? And then finally, that L, that limitless opportunities. Do I feel that I could be anything I want to be in this space? Does it provide me with the opportunities for growth? Does it literally take off the chains of impossibility and push and propel me into a world of possibilities? So that's what I'm thinking about for me in terms of safe space. Does it allow me to be real, resilient, empowered, authentic, and does it provide me with those opportunities for limitless opportunities, allow me propel into my future career, professional ambitions, or whatever the case may be? So does it allow me to be real? Thank you.
Thank y'all. So we heard about authenticity twice. And then we also heard about the importance of using our voice, kind of figuring out exactly what that looks like, how to navigate that. So for the panelists, we talked about safe spaces. And I want to ask, can you remember a time where someone created safety, created a safe space for you, whether that was personally or professionally?
I think I can contribute to this. One of the things that I think a lot about when I think about safe spaces is also tears, y'all. I'm a crier, okay? And I'm trying to figure out what spaces I have to emotionally show up, right? To be my best self. And I'd actually have to call out one of the deans. She is currently at Virginia Commonwealth University. And I remember getting into my PhD program and calling her one day to be like, hey, I think I want to do this and I cannot afford it. And she was like, okay. And I was like, I'm, trying to figure out where I'm gonna be able to work. Can I get a graduate assistantship? Like, what's possible to be able to do this? And I remember sitting on that phone, crunching numbers. I'm talking about pen and paper, like, if I take this, how much this? If I take this, how much this? And being tears because I wanted to be in a PhD program so bad, right? And like couldn't make the math work. And what I thought was so powerful about that particular situation is she didn't know me, right? And I had gotten her phone number from somebody else. Someone said just give her a call. And so when I think about safety, I think about that particular individual who created space where I could really show up, right? While I was frustrated and emotional and also super committed to the experience, but was really trying to figure out like how to make it happen. She like created a space for me to do that. And what's really beautiful about that particular experience was once I did get to the university, I remember stopping by her office to say thank you, right? And she was like, okay, let me know how your semester goes. I had the opportunity to reach back out a couple months later to be like, I survived, right? Like semester one, thing we did in the books, we did it, thank you. And she was like, actually, I got a job. Do you need a job? And I was like, yes, I do. And then she became my boss, right? And so for me, that safe space, getting to what you're talking about, Ryan, just created more opportunity, and I was able to work so closely with her throughout my PhD program, and it was just really powerful, right, on a number of levels. So for me, that her ability to listen and respond and hold space when without having to know a lot about me, and doing so in a way that just, allowed me to really show up. And that was, I mean, finances and grad programs are a thing, so that was a game changer.
If I
I
can
love
really
that.
touch
Oh,
on what Portia said, I too had somebody at VCU who I didn't really know. And I very briefly, a couple of years ago, I applied for 2 jobs at VCU and I was the finalist for both jobs. One called me back first and I just took that job. The other one, I was the finalist and I had to tell them, hey, I took this other job over here. However, the person who would have been my supervisor at this other job I ultimately did not take. I reached out to her because she's a Black woman at VCU and I heard about how phenomenal she was. So I decided to say like, hey, although I didn't take this job, I would love to connect with you professionally and personally and just learn more about kind of how you were able to advance in your career. And because I stepped out of my comfort zone, I'm not typically a person who does that, but because I stepped out of my comfort zone, we've been able to have like kind of what Portia said, like those real conversations about the issues I've been experiencing and she's been experiencing as well as a Black woman in the ivory tower. She has been someone who's empowered me, who's poured into me, who sees things in me that sometimes I don't even see in myself. Because sometimes, if I'm honest, as a Black woman, my self-confidence gets a little shaky, right? And she says, Lauren, look, you cannot let them see you sweat. She tells me and kind of helps me to navigate in certain spaces. She's given me kind of like the resources and the tools of how to navigate, the system with like poise and professionalism. She supports me. So I know I've had speaking engagements where I'll literally look up in the room and she's in the audience taking pictures of me. And I'm like, what is she doing here? And then I return the favor, right? I show up for her as well. And in many ways, it has been like a supportive sisterhood that I didn't know I needed as well as a professional in the field and a PhD Black female student at VCU. She has been kind of like that professional guy that has really allowed me to take off my mask, unload my burdens, and kind of just embrace who I am and my experiences without fear or judgment. So I'm right there with you, Portia.
yes, I love that. And very similarly, it's someone that I work with at the counseling center. I consider her like a matriarch right now for in my life. And I started working there when I was a master's student, now doctoral candidate. So she's seen me progress in a lot of ways. And every single step of the way, she has just been my cheerleader. She has rooted for me. Along with a safe space for me, it comes a lot of challenging me and a lot of accountability. So someone holding me accountable when I'm just like kind of on my BS. And for her, there was a one time I had went several weeks with telling her I haven't written anything for my dissertation. And then it was one day and she was like, well, you're not leaving the office until you sit in my office for 30 minutes. And she made me write my paper in her office. So a lot of accountability and just like a lot of love and care. So that for me was what a safe space is someone challenging me, someone rooting for me, and me knowing and acknowledging that this is coming from a place of love and compassion, of her wanting to see me be successful. And we've had so many conversations of just different racial issues and just racial tension that happens on the campus. And she's always the first person to reach out to me, even sometimes before my supervisor. She reaches out to me and checks in on me, see how I'm doing, and just see how I'm feeling about things that are going on. So she has created a safe space for me and has also been a model of how I want to be able to create a safe space for others.
I would like to add something to the conversation too. And Portia, you gave me permission to cry. So if I cry talking about this, it's your fault. But I know we talked about twins. My twin sister has been a person that has constantly created safe space for me. And we've actually switched roles. So she had her daughter first. And I feel like she stepped more into her womanhood after she became a mom, because I started to see her like really speak up. She went off to college, her confidence grew. And so I just saw a whole different version of her. And so instead of me being a loud, confident one, we kind of switched a little bit, right? So I wasn't used to her sticking up and standing up for me. And I know we've been talking a lot about, the matriarch right now. My relationship with my mom hasn't always been traditional as most people would see it. And so her experience with our mom has been different. And so two people, same house, same mom, two total different experiences. But I love how my sister has always shown just acceptance for my experience with my mom, and she's never judged me for it. And so I remember when I started my healing work, she told me, she said, I'm gonna say this, but I'm saying it with love. And she said, you are still stuck at 17 years old when that trauma hit. So emotionally, you are still 17 years old. But I remember feeling like, because normal me would be like, what you just say, but the way she prefaced it and just the love and the energy behind what she was saying, I felt like I needed to hear that. And it's actually what helped me be the person I am now and kind of get over that resentment that I was still holding on to and open up so many opportunities for me personally and professionally. So I just love how constantly the person who knows me like the back of my hand, you've been in the room with me literally since before time, has been a gift to me, because I haven't always felt accepted in spaces, with other women. But I think a lot of that was my own stuff too. And so having her beside me just to be able to put things into perspective with her degree, with her sociology and her psychology information and knowledge has been a true gift. So I just wanted to share that personal anecdote.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing that. So we talked about, which I completely emphasize, the freedom to cry. That's important to my to my safety. We talked about calling people, having people check in on us, having people show up for us. We talked about reaching out to people, even if that's not in our nature. And we talked about letting people, politely let us know what they're seeing in us and maybe things that we can improve. And I think from each example that you all shared and people creating safety for you, you also shared ways that you create safety for yourselves. You talked about being able to cry, showing up with that vulnerability, being your authentic self, reflecting on past traumas and how that might have impacted you. So I want to thank you all for the safe spaces you create for others. And I want to commend you for creating safety for yourselves as well, because that is also very, very important. I now do want to open up the chat, or feel free to unmute. If you have any questions for our panelists, go ahead and take the time to check in and ask.
Hi, y'all. Good evening. My name is Ashley. I'm an educator as well, so I love this conversation. Shout out to Dr. Hanley for putting this panel together, during Women's History Month, and just creating literally a safe space herself for you all to share your stories and be super vulnerable with us. My question for the panel is kind of piggybacking off of the idea of creating safe spaces. So I often think about safe spaces as psychological safety, right? Like when we're talking about our emotions and things like that, where can I really be my authentic self? My question for all these educated Black women on the panel, when was the first time you felt safety, like in an intellectual way? Like when you felt very free to not only share your ideas, but know that they were going to be valued and appreciated and not just in one ear out of the other. And if you haven't, I'm just kind of curious about your thoughts around that.
I would love to start this one off because I actually have some insecurities in this space still. I'm not college educated. I went to a trade school for about 6 months and that just did not work out. Very intelligent. I'm just not a great student. But I'm actually thinking about going back to school soon for some business management, since I have a business now. And so I remember when Dr. Hanley asked me to do this yesterday, I went and did my research. I'm like, oh, these girls are educated. We talk about PhDs and masters. And so I love that for y'all. But I did feel like, am I supposed to be here? But I know that I am. And I love that you asked that question, because I'm sure your guys' experience is really different, because, we have not always been seen and heard. We were taught literally to just be seen and not heard. And so having all these brilliant ideas and going to school, I'm sure it comes with its own set of challenges with trying to express that. And so I would love to hear from y'all on that. But I did want to share that because it's actually something I'm still dealing with as a speaker and putting myself out there and trying to grow my business in that regard. And so this is actually a stepping stone for me tonight. So thank you for the experience.
I'm still thinking about my answer, but I just wanted to say I felt the exact same way with this. I was like, Erin, I don't know enough things to be on a panel. So I know that you mentioned that you're not like college educated or formally college educated, and just know like you're not alone in that experience, right? It isn't just in isolation of if you have a degree or not. I feel like maybe a few of us already in here has felt similarly of like, oh, do I know enough? Like that is imposter syndrome, right? Or this phenomenon of feeling less than and feeling minimized, which is like comes from racism and systemic racism of feeling less than or questioning ourselves. But I'm still thinking of my answer, Ash, but I just wanted to say I really resonate with what you said.
Thank you, Amber. I appreciate that.
Maybe I can add a few things. Also, I'm gonna drop an article in here for folks who want to read it in just a second. But Tari also wrote this piece called "Whose Culture." Let me get it right. Whose culture has power, or something like that. My point is, there's a framework around community cultural wealth, and what she gets at is there's this idea of like our familial wealth, our like navigational capital, our ability to connect in community. It's about language, all these things that we need to actually reframe our values around. And those things are powerful, and those things are equal to education, just like going to school forever, right? Like those things are equally as good. And I like this question, but I'm not sure if I'm able to pinpoint the exact moment, because I think in reality, I've never seen any particular space that's 100% safe, right? And many of our institutions by design are riddled with bias and brokenness that has not allowed Black women to show up. And Melissa Harris Perry wrote this book. If you haven't read it, it's dope. It was kind of old. She wrote it in like 2011, but she wrote this book called Sister Citizen, and she particularly talks about how the world is basically created these spaces, what she calls cricket rooms, and this idea that Black women in no way have ever been able to stand upright because we are constantly being bombarded with images that have warped our idea of humanity. And so it's like we're trying to exist in a space that was actually never designed for us to exist, right? And we still have somehow figured out how to navigate it, right? And so I don't know if I know the exact moment that I thought it was cool enough, smart enough, worthy enough, whatever, to show up and speak. But what I will say is that that moment can come and can also be fleeting, right? So I think about coming to, going to like undergrad and was like, this is an odd place. This is the first time I felt like I was the most myself. And I was quirky, and I was like, what in the world? Like, how do I like hold this together so people don't think I'm strange? And then I got to, my master's program, and I had the pleasure of working closely with a lot of organizers who were so committed to community that anything other than authenticity was not good enough. And so I was like, cool, I gotta just like be me. And I think there's a certain level of power that I got from that. And then I got to VCU and will never forget turning in a paper and a professor telling me you can't be an educational leader, that particular area of focus isn't worthy, or that my frameworks around Black women were too intangible. And I thought to myself, this is crazy, but I got all this stuff that I could like had a space to say it. And so I think there are moments where I get to show up, and then there are moments that are fleeting, and then I don't know if I have that same power. But what I will leave you with is that you can create those moments for yourself, right? And those things don't come without risk. Those things don't come without challenge, but you can create those spaces so they make sense for you. And what a privilege it is to be able to articulate that thing that you want to say in the language that was given to you and gifted to you. What a privilege it is to be able to tell your homies this thing that you've been studying, and because it's important, or the thing that you've read. What a privilege it is to teach young people, right? Like you get to occupy the spaces that work for you. So while I can't figure out the right moment, my encouragement is to find those moments for yourself and do your best to show up. And even if they're fleeting, go back to them, right? Recreate it again and again and again and again and again and again and again, until you're reminded every time that the work that you do, how you show up, who you are, and all the things in the middle are super valuable and important on a daily basis.
Thank y'all so much. I'm gonna go ahead and pass the offering plate right now.
Ash, I do like the question that you asked though. I think for me, I've been in school for a very long time. But I do think where for me, because I'm a writer, so I learned how to have a safe space when I attended Liberty University. Just writing so many papers, but learning how to be a part of different discussion boards and different things. And Liberty is a religious school, so we had to always use like our religion and our background in Christianity to kind of have a focal point of what we're trying to say when we're discussing certain topics within the discussion board with our classmates, and learning how to get, like accepting feedback, criticism, or anything that could like help propel your writing. I would like to say that that's where I kind of found my voice, and like just being able to write freely, being able to be like my authentic self in my writing, and being, and having classmates actually accept that and understand where I was coming from based on whatever topic we were writing about. So I do think that I think Liberty University did help me in that way to just be able to learn how to stand up for myself, use my voice. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to learn from other classmates, and being able to actually respond back to other classmates on their writings and things like that. So it's definitely a unique experience when you are in at a university and you're able to join discussion boards and panels and different things like that, because you're able to like learn how to be authentically you, and it's okay to be that way and create those spaces. So I thank you for your question. I think that was a really good question to access. Thank you.
And thank you for your response.
You're
Definitely.
welcome.
Oh, I see a hand. Ms. Ania, you have a question?
I do. My name is Zania. Hi. I went to VCU as well, go Rams. I am currently a social worker, and I am in a clinical supervisor role. So this is my first time being a supervisor. I supervise QMHPCs and A's who do intensive in-home services and mental health skill building services. I am so grateful for this panel because I am really struggling with this safe space aspect with my position, because while I know I am doing a good job, I think that I hit a turning point this week where I feel like it might be time for me to leave this space. So my question is how do you guys, I guess, navigate doing the work that you do, trying to figure out how to maintain like your sense of self, continue to do the good work while knowing that you might not be in the best space in order for you to do so.
Thanks for that question, Zania. I just want to quickly share our panel ends at 6. So if our panelists would like to drop their contact info in case people want to check in, follow as they're answering Zania's amazing question. I know our audience would appreciate it.
Dania, do me a favor. Ask the last part of your question because I want to be focused in my answer and I don't want to go on a tangent.
I think how I phrased it was, how do you, I guess, like navigate, like still showing up to work on a daily basis and doing the good work while you might not be in like, a safe space? Because I don't think I'm not to the point where I'm just gonna like walk out and quit because, bills, life, my team, like the clients and things like that. But just trying to figure out how to navigate a space that might not be as safe as what I thought it was.
Yeah. Okay, I think I can make this pretty quick. I think that you have to think a little bit about what it's costing you. Because I think sometimes as Black women, we are really good at just like pushing through. The resiliency and our ability to be resistant in places is really powerful, but could also cost us, right? So I think you have to decide what's the cost. If it is not working for you, you have the agency to think about what would, right? And I'm not telling you to walk away from your job in any way, shape, or form, but I think like if it's costing you your sleep and your health, and we know that like historically stress lives in our bellies, right? Like if we're not able to like function as humans, something has to change. And I think you should think a little bit about like what that could be. And in some cases, I have to do less, right? In other cases, is I have to leave the organization as a whole. In some cases, it might be setting boundaries, right? Where you might be giving your all and past the time that you should. Maybe going above and beyond in this space isn't the right space. I just caution you to think about whether or not you're pushing through is sustainable.
Yeah, very similarly to Portia. First of all, intensive in-home work is so difficult. So like that in itself is draining as someone else who has done it in the past. But for me, I don't have a lot of loyalty to workplaces. I get what I need from it. And then if I need to go somewhere else, that's what I would do. And I definitely hear you with like, you need to pay bills at the end of the day. But maybe right now you want to evaluate sustainability and also being able to see how are you able to fill your cup in other places, because it seems though maybe work is draining for you right now and you don't want to spend everything drained and then going to a new job feeling drained and depleted and maybe disenchanted. So definitely be able to, how can you create a safe space outside of work? And also think of whatever the greater good means for you, because that doesn't necessarily mean you have to go above and beyond for your supervisees. Maybe the greater good is being able to point them to the right direction and being able to connect them to different resources. So look at what your own load is and what do you have accessibility to do, because you may not be able to run at 75% the way that you want to. It's okay if you're at 40% right now. That is not a hit on you. It doesn't mean anything about you, but just check in with yourself and also think once again of what will be that like last line where you're like, yeah, I need to go somewhere else. But definitely start filling your cup in other places so that you're not completely drained day in and day out.
Thank y'all.
Wow, perfect timing too. Thank you all so much for your audience questions. Lauren had to hop off. Amber, Dr. Portia, Soleil, I want to thank y'all so much for joining and giving all these gems to this audience. Please stay in connection with our panelists. They've dropped their info in the chat for you. So please keep up with them. Please keep up with me as well. I'm going to try to post more events on LinkedIn so you all can see them and be able to join us. And thank you all so much. Happy Women's History Month and happy International Women's Day. And happy Friday. Y'all have a good weekend. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you guys. Thank you, queens.
Thank y'all.